Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is finally time for my top 10 books of 2024. I wished I could have gotten it out like Friday to Sunday, but I had a lot of work to catch up on before we went back to school. But it was a snow day today, so I finally have time to kind of sit down and film this all for you guys. These are my top 10 books of 2024. Now, I do have two honorable mentions before we begin. The first is I'm gonna try to keep I tried to keep the list to sci-fi and fantasy because that's what I cover here on my channel. But What If 2 made the top spot. It was my favorite book that I read this year. And so I just wanted to shout it out. I have a review of all of Randall Munroe's books on my channel, but this was my top book of the year. In order to keep it sci-fi fantasy based, I'm just going to treat this as an honorable mention. My second honorable mention is a series that would have gotten on the list had I finished it in time, and that's going to be the Red Rising series. I read all 6 books this year. They just kept getting better. It was an amazing series, and based on how I wait like a week or two in order to put books on my ranking list in order to make sure that it's not just like gut reaction after finishing a book. I actually sit down and think about that. Lightbringer just missed out on this list and just missed out on being ranked. I think it might have been on this list if I had ranked it, but the Red Rising series has been amazing. Go check out my reviews of books 3, 4, 5, and I'll probably get a review of book 1 and 2 later on my channel if you want to learn more about that, but highly recommend Red Rising. But without further ado, I'm going to jump into the list and spoilers for all of the books I'm going to mention. Put the spoiler warning on the screen now. All right. In 10th place is going to be Unseen Academicals by Terry Pratchett. I adored this book. Any book that's up here I absolutely love. I think it's a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. But Unseen Academicals by Terry Pratchett was just amazing. There are only a couple of Discworld books that I like better than Unseen Academicals, but one particular note about Unseen Academicals is I would think this is, in my opinion, the magnum opus of Terry Pratchett's Discworld. Well, I think that there are books that are funnier, there are books where I like the characters better. If I were to give a recommendation of what is the best written book in Discworld, the book that does everything that Discworld does well the best, it is where Terry Pratchett is firing on all cylinders. This is the last Wizards book. It's one of the last books of the series. It was in kind of like the golden era for some of his best books. This is, I think, the best book in Discworld. There are books I think maybe had a little bit better of an execution. There are books I thought were funnier. There are books that I enjoyed more. But if I were just to rank on sheer quality, Unseen Academicals would be my ranking for the best Discworld novel. And it's not hard to see why. The Wizards are always funny, and while they play a lesser role in this book, their shenanigans and what they get up to is hilarious. The characters are well written. We're back in Ankh-Morpork during its golden era and seeing the complex dynamics that go on inside the city. The Veneer of Sports is a really fun avenue to explore kind of the commentary and issues that Pratchett explores. The orcs are orcs are another interesting exploration where we're taking a often stereotyped fantasy race like he did with goblins before, like he did with golems before, and adding a new layer, and forcing you to reconsider your preconceived notions, not just about the fantasy race, but the real-world impacts of what it represents. In addition, it's in Ankh-Morpork, one of the best-written fantasy cities that I've ever read, and it was just phenomenal. Unseen Academicals is Terry Pratchett's, or at least Discworld's magnum opus, and I wouldn't start here. Obviously, it's the last Wizards book, but this is the book that, if I had to put all of them just based on sheer quality, this would be number 1. In 9th place is going to be Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, and that's going to be a theme for this year. Sanderson has dominated this ranking list, as you'll soon see, and Oathbringer is my 4th favorite Stormlight Archive novel. If you want to, you'll find out what the one that didn't make the cut was as we go through the other ones. But Oathbringer was great. While I do think it is one of the weaker entries in the series. Personally, for me, it's just I'm not the biggest fan of the middle. I don't think that the Shadesmar sections are as enjoyable as some of the other sections in the book. Even like the Kholinar sections were good, had great moments, but there's a lot to be desired. And we're kind of stuck in the middle point there of we have to set up for the major conflicts and the major cosmerical connections that appear in Rhythm of War and Wind and Truth. But we're having to shift away from the setting and the conflicts that had been prevalent in Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. And so we're at this kind of weird transition point of the book. We have to set up Shadesmar well. We have to set up Urithu. There's all these things that we need to set up, and it just does. We have to make sure the Knights Radiant are ready for what they need to deal with, and it just kind of there's a little bit that, especially compared to the books around it, it just doesn't. It isn't as strong as I hoped it would have been. It still has amazing moments. The finale is phenomenal. Shadesmar is such an interesting location to explore. Some of the scenes in Kholinar are really tense. The magic. It's the Stormlight magic system. It's phenomenal. It's an amazing book. Like, genuinely, it falls a little bit for me just because of it's an awkward place in the series, making it not the most enjoyable. That being said, it also has some of the best flashbacks in the series. I absolutely adored Dalinar's flashbacks. They're probably my second favorite in the entire series. They were just amazing. Overall, it is an amazingly well-written book that just has some, based on where its places in the series, just drawbacks for me. All right, then back to Discworld for number 8, Raising Steam, the last Moist von Lipwig book, and I think my responses to that is very similar to Unseen Academicals, with a little bit more humor added in. Moist von Lipwig is a hilarious protagonist, and I think the humor is cranked up a little bit more for that one, which it just made it a more enjoyable read. I also like Moist von Lipwig a ton. And it focuses on him more than Unseen Academicals. But honestly, just the reason I liked Raising Steam so much is I felt that it tied Discworld together really well. Because yes, The Shepherd's Crown was a great book, and it was very deserving of being the last book in the series, but Raising Steam ties the series as a whole together so well. It's this actual physical embodiment of Discworld moving into an era that you can't go back from, right? Discworld, we saw the technological advancement, we saw the passage of time, but we're suddenly the railroads connecting, into the deepest reaches of Uberwald. Suddenly, the conflict like you would see in, it's up here. It's not, it's somewhere. Like we see in The Fifth Elephant, where this treacherous journey by carriage is suddenly different, and Discworld will never be the same after this. Unseen Academicals focuses more on like the societal impacts. Snuff closes out one of the characters we've grown a super big characters arc, and Shepherd's Crown finishes out a storyline that had been repeating in the Witches novels, but Raising Steam just seems like the finale of Discworld. You cannot come back from this point, and that just is just that finality that made it so enjoyable for me. As like we knew, like a train, we're barreling towards the end of Discworld, and you can't stop it, so you kind of just have to enjoy the ride. And it was great. It was a really fun novel. There were some drawbacks for me. I was never the biggest fan of how Vetinari was treated in Snuff and Raising Steam. I get the characters have to evolve, and Vetinari didn't really, besides his appearance in Guards, but it kind of irked me. I didn't love how he was portrayed in those two books, but that was a minor thing compared to just how wonderful how wonderful the book was. It also was less cynical than the other Moist von Lipwig books. The other two Moist von Lipwig books were very cynical, and it was just a more lighthearted take. It still had some of the cynicism there, but the more lightheartedness was definitely a point in its favor. It made it a more enjoyable book to read through. But a phenomenal finale and an absolutely amazing novel. All right, then in seventh place is going to be Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. So we're back to Stormlight. I enjoyed Rhythm. I enjoyed Rhythm of War. I really did. It's kind of seemed to me that we were finally at the point where the Radiants were able to. It's hard to describe, but we're finally at the point where the Radiants are able to function, and they're able to actually go out and do things. We had the first two books where there were barely Radiants, or just kind of people with powers. The next book where Radiants were trying to come into their own, and finally a book where they have, and they can finally be useful, they can be productive, they can actually accomplish tasks. It's not just like we saw at the finale of the previous book, where it was kind of like it was literally just like 7 different Radiants who were doing everything, because they're the only ones far enough along in their journey to do so. But this one was not the case. The Radiants were up and running. It was exciting to see that. But I think the highlight of this book for me was Navani and Kaladin. Their time in the tower, their interactions with the captivity, Kaladin's arc throughout this entire book, especially after failing to swear an oath at the end of Oathbringer, and then finally getting there here at the end of Rhythm of War, was amazing. Navani becoming more confident and coming into her own as a scholar, learning more about the Fused. There was very little to not like about this book. Even the parts in the Shadesmar and Lasting Integrity, which weren't my favorite, Shallan and Adolin and all of their interactions were good enough that I didn't really care. In addition to bringing in stuff from the Cosmere as a whole, made it enjoyable to read. I do have some critiques. Yasna got on my nerves even more in this book than previous, but we'll talk about that when we get. But it was fine. The few scenes she was in weren't my favorite, but she's better than when she was given more screen time. And then of course this one has by far the worst flashbacks. I want to punch Venli just so much. Her scenes, her flashbacks were infuriating to read, and I honestly hate her. So that's what kind of brings the book down, but even that wasn't enough to dampen my excitement for just how good of a book Rhythm of War was. It was amazing. I think Sanderson was firing on all cylinders here, especially not even just at the end when you have the Sanderlands. I think it was just consistent throughout the book, and a huge step up from Oathbringer, because there were just very little that I disliked about this book. Then in sixth place is going to be Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. I just really enjoyed this book. The setting was great. The characters were great. The plot was interesting. How it was done. The conflict was interesting. The magic system was unique. At least it was unique. If it's not my favorite in the Cosmere, but it was at least unique, and it was just a fun, cozy book. I just really enjoyed reading it. It was something casual and light that just even despite the Cosmere implications was just a fun book to kind of get through. And just the fact that it didn't have too many, really any downsides. There were some scenes that dragged, but there were no really major downsides, and so it kind of was elevated because of that. It wasn't the most complex or in-depth Cosmere book, but it just didn't make a lot of mistakes, really any mistakes of note, and that just kind of bumps it up for me. In addition, design was great, getting to see her in Oathbringer. I just finished Oathbringer when I read... I think I just finished Oathbringer when I read Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and so getting to see kind of that transition there was a lot of fun. Overall, just a really fun book to read. Top 5 now. In 5th place is my number 4 ranked Discworld book of all time. It is The Last Continent. And this book is just amazing. I did not initially love the Wizard series when I went into it, and it was finally The Last Continent that swayed me. It is hilarious. It is all of the humor that I've come to love from the Wizards, and that just makes it amazing. It doesn't have necessarily the commentary that Pratchett is known for. There are some fun moments in there of that, but it is simply just the humor of the members of the university staff, like the dean and the arch chancellor, and all of them in their separate corner, and then the hilarity of Rincewind in his separate corner. It's a fun setting and environment, and the plot just facilitates humor. It is a book that is humor for humor's sake, and I love it for it. There's no super in-depth and dedicated plot. It's not changing Discworld. It's not super urgent or crazy. It's just Rincewind is in a new setting, and the university has to get him out, and hilarity ensues. And it is just such a fun story, and it is just the humor that I love of Discworld. It is everything I could have wanted from a funny Discworld book and more. And it's just that humor that propels it. It is the wit that Pratchett is known for, all condensed into a single novel. It is the funniest Discworld novel, hands down, and I absolutely love it for that. In fourth place is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, which was just very similar to not Yumi and the Nightmare. It's Trust of the Emerald Sea. I'm stupid. It's Trust the Emerald Sea, which is very similar to Yumi and the Nightmare Painter in the fact that it doesn't try to do anything crazy. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel at the Cosmere. It's not trying to tell this grand epic story. It is simply giving us an interesting setting, interesting magic, and just letting the characters in the world and the adventure that they're going on speak for themselves. It helps that it's a pirate story, which is, I love pirates, and seafaring and all that, so that helped a lot. The characters, I don't think there's a bad character among them. Every single one is just amazing. I love all of the characters in this book, even the ones that I love to hate. In addition to that, it is a book where the world does so much, like, the characters do all the heavy lifting, but so does the world. The world is so inventive and imaginative. I'm just, like, your mind is spinning with the possibilities of what could happen in this world and how that affects the Cosmere, at the same time of being in awe about how crazy and interesting the world is and all of the different applications. It is a fun world with fun characters. It's able to pull in the Cosmere implications with the Ire and the Elantrans. It's able to have Hoid in it, and his inventive style, while also having a great character in worlds that just prop it all up. It's cozy. It's just a fun, light-hearted book that is just a joy to read. It is hands down one of my favorite books. And starting off the top three is Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson. I read 3 Malazan books this year because they are an event, and I need time to cope and clear my mind of the horrible things that happened in those books. But Dead House Gates, far more than the other 2 I read this year, was just phenomenal. It does have its low parts. There are sections of the book that I really don't like, that were a drag to read. There were characters that I didn't necessarily like. It is probably, at this point in the series, it is the only book where I have this many gripes and complaints with certain parts of the stories, especially with Felton and the parts in the prison. I just wasn't jiving with that as much as I would have liked. But it doesn't matter, because The Chain of Dogs is one of the best story arcs that I've ever read, period. It is simply phenomenal. I can't think of any other way to describe The Chain of Dogs storyline. It's got so little hope, but it's still there. It's tragic. The characters are phenomenal. The action is great. It is brutal. It is everything that I could have possibly asked for in an arc of storytelling, all condensed into The Chain of Dogs. It wipes away any other gripes that I have with the book, which really just come from kind of the Felton storyline. Ikram and Moab were great. I enjoyed their arc the entire way through, even the parts with when they were in the monastery, not monastery, the temple or whatever. The story with Captain Pran and their journey down was also, was it Pran? Yeah. Yeah, I'm right. I'm not stupid. was great as well. It didn't really have the slow bits. We didn't focus on them a lot, as well as the final section when they actually made it to Mala's city was really well done. But all it doesn't matter what the rest of the book's contents was, simply because of the Chain of Dogs, it made it all worth it. It was, like I said, the best stretch of storytelling that I ever read in my entire life. It started tragically, it ended tragically, and all the way through was just phenomenal writing. In second place, we are going to have Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. And this still remains one of my favorite Cosmere books, one of my favorite Stormlight and Cosmere books, simply because it is a point in the novels where I think it is the best execution of a simple epic fantasy as you can get. In my opinion, because we haven't reached the point where you've got this massive expanding Cosmere like we do in Wind and Truth or in Rhythm of War. The story hasn't exploded and gone crazy. We're not dealing with 80 different POVs from all around the world. It's still relatively grounded here in the Shattered Plains, and has those fantasy elements, but isn't just like overloading you with everything that Sanderson has to offer, while simultaneously filled with wonderful characters that I just enjoyed reading the entire way through. Shallan isn't as annoying as she was in this book as she was in the first part. Her flashbacks are the best in the Stormlight Archive, in my opinion. Rhythm of War is just a simple story executed right. You have a countdown. You have a countdown to when you need to invade to the Everstorm. You have things you need to do in that time. Dalinar tries to unite the High Princes. Kaladin is trying to grapple with depression and his job in this new world. And Shallan is doing some investigative journalism. As well as dealing with some of the aftermath of what happened with Yasna on the ship and all of the train wreck that happened in the beginning there. But it's a well-executed story. There aren't many flaws or gripes that I have with how the story was executed. Shallan's flashbacks were wonderful. I enjoyed seeing that kind of look into her past. It really, I think, set up her character well, even more than Kaladin. Kaladin's flashbacks were good, but this set him up even more than before. Dalinar's flashbacks were great, and I think that perfectly set him up. I hate Venli, and Sazeth, it was good for that story. But Shallan's, I think, perfectly set up her arcs in the next stories. It was just wonderful execution. The Sanderlanche of that story is one of my favorite in all of the novels. That finale gave me chills. It was just a well-executed book, every way you look at it. This was definitely the year of Sanderson for me this year. Last year, I read a lot of Discworld, so it was the year of Pratchett. But this year is definitely Brandon Sanderson's year, and Wind and Truth quite easily takes the top spot for number one book of the year here. It was just amazing. It was just it was everything I could have wanted from this book was here. I recommend you check out my review of Wind and Truth. I posted on my channel about 2 weeks ago, I think. I go in much more depth about why I love this book. But it was the culmination of all of the Cosmere up to this point, and it was just so well done. I have very few complaints with this book, and all those complaints are minor nitpicky things. All in all, this book was just simply phenomenal, and I don't know if Sanderson could have closed out the first era of the Stormlight Archive better than he did here. It was just amazing. It was just amazing book, hands down, and easily. Alright, I hope you enjoyed my ranking of all the books I read in 2024. I read a lot of great sci-fi and fantasy this year, and it was just a really exciting experience for the first time getting to share that with people. Kind of with with the book reviews and my summer reading that I talked about. It was just so much fun to get to share my love of reading, my passion for reading with other people. And I hope you enjoyed the 6-month journey that we went on together with the books, because I didn't start till the summertime. And I'm excited for a new year with a lot of new possibilities. I definitely will be getting a Lightbringer review out for you soon. I don't know when, but it will be soon. Maybe they already called the day off tomorrow, so I might get it to you tomorrow. But I got that coming for you. I'm almost done with Name of the Wind. So I do have book reviews to get to you, and I hope that you enjoyed my content over this past 6 months and that you'll continue to enjoy it through the next year. If you have any recommendations for books that you want me to see me read in the new year, I'm kind of finishing up a lot of series that I have been. I got No More Cosmere to read. I got No More Discworld to read. And once Wheel of Time's done, I'm kind of out of books, out of major series that I'm in the middle of. So if you have recommendations, put them in the comments down below, and I will try to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.